Thank you, Dale. Our next commentator is going to be Joey Hartman. And Joey's been a labor activist for 25 years and going strong. Since 1996, she's worked at the Hospital Employees Union, where she is the assistant to the president. And most interesting to me, I guess, is that she's involved in that organization that does those wonderful calendars. She is the BC Vice President of the Pacific Northwest Labor History Association, which has been promoting workers' heritage in BC, Washington, and Oregon since 1968. And she's included in her note for me the very exciting information that the next conference they'll have is going to be at Simon Fraser Harbor Center this coming June 10 to 12, 2005, with a theme, the 100th anniversary of the IWW. Great theme. So, Joey Hartman.
Thank you. Those of you who are familiar with the Labor History Association know that really our main focus is to bring academics and labor activists and students together in forums to learn from each other, which is actually a pretty rare thing. Normally academics meet with academics and labor activists meet with labor activists and students study together, but to bring the three into the same room and learn together is quite unique, actually, we think. And so that's what the Labor History Association stands for. And I come to it from a labor activist role. So those of you who know me know that I am not an academic, and one of the things that I really liked about this book is how readable it was for someone like me, who comes to it through the labor movement and who was drawn into it as I read the pages, which I did, by the way, on the beach in Mexico this last week. And so I know, I mean, one part of that I know is really hard, but the other part of it is everybody else around me is reading trashy novels, and there I am with my Canadian Bolsheviks and going through with little sticky tabs. I was intrigued when I first read that Ian Angus's statement was his intent to rescue this history from, quote, decades of distortion by both anti-communists and Stalinist writers. I thought, oh, okay, where's he going to come from? And coming from the labor movement, I was also very interested to learn what his perspective was going to be about the Communist Party and the labor movement in Canada. He didn't settle for simplistic answers, I found, but rather detailed the different periods, dominant influences, and provided understandable reasons for what he was saying. And while there are always different factions that were working in parallel at different times, I think it's fair to say that there was some main themes. That at points the communists were very much at the forefront of organized labor, active within the memberships and relating to other workers on issues that they most care about as a base from which to then evolve their radicalism. At other times, the communists rejected unions as a tool of capitalism, reducing the working class to wage slaves and seeking a better deal within a corrupt system. In other words, there was just nowhere to go with it. So let's stay right out of it. And it's also true that many unions continue to view the economic success of their bosses as beneficial to the workers. I think that's been true throughout history. In periods when the strict theorists held the lead in the Communist Party, and that the party saw its purpose as being more to educate than to activate, the real issues facing workers were not addressed, and the party seemed less relevant to working people. At those periods, membership dwindled, as Ian points out in his book. But again, he explains why and how and what was going on concurrently, so that it all pieces together. The whole puzzle is there for us. The book talks about undergroundism in response to the police raids, harassment and prosecution, and the deportation of many of the communists following 1919 and the formations. And the CPC founding convention even added a clause to the Constitution declaring the party as, quote, an underground illegal organization, even though orders of council had been repealed 2 years earlier. So while the harassment was continuing, the illegality was not. And it made it very difficult, as he points out in the book, for the labor movement activists who might even want to join the party to find the party. There was a newspaper with no address, no information about who published it, not even what city it was published in. So if you wanted to make that link, you really had to work hard to find it. But he also notes that the level of secrecy about the party throughout the years has been generally exaggerated. And that's provided the government and business unions and whoever wants to do the red baiting to basically isolate the Communist Party as saying, you guys are on the outside, you're scary, you don't belong, you're foreigners, that you're trying to bring a Bolshevik Canada, all of those kinds of things that have been used in the red baiting over the years. And the labor movement on its side has also been very conservative at times, and other times radical. Again, the factions within the labor movement at any one time have been within all of those degrees of the spectrum. And also, I think one of the influences is that most of the large unions in Canada were very dominated by their international US-based unions, and that again furthered McCarthyism, red baiting, all of those influences that were going on in the US labor movement were also certainly being replicated in Canada to some of a lesser degree, but certainly there. And as we've had the last couple of decades, more and more unions breaking away from their internationals, that some of that's become more easily. But even in my own experience, when I was part of the Vancouver Municipal and Regional Employees Union in the early 1980s, which was an independent union, I recall that the woman who motivated a vote to become an affiliate, because we were an independent union at the time, after she had done so, someone else who I thought was very progressive said, well, of course she did that. She's a communist. As if that's the agenda, you know. And I was really quite surprised that even as recently as that it was a way of just discrediting somebody's opinion. And I would say, too, that more recently, I mean, we do look at the reason for evaluating history is, again, because what can we learn from it for the current and for the future? And that while the party, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the influence is not as obvious in the labor movement, but the roots of very many labor leaders today, people who are very influential in the labor movement, are rooted in the Communist Party, and that they continue to contribute greatly to the movement. And I guess one of the places I look currently for hope and inspiration is in South America, where many countries are now moving into electing some very socialist governments. And that there's some new policies that are being developed and implemented that are pretty radical by the standards in North America. And one example that I think we can learn from is that in Venezuela, the Labor Central is now organizing unemployed workers. And I hope that that's something that we can move towards in Canada, as we once had it here through the Workers' Unity League. So thank you very much.